You've been lied to, not by one person, not by one institution, but by an entire system designed to keep you comfortable, distracted, and weak. The world doesn't want you strong. It doesn't want you thinking clearly. It wants you scrolling, consuming, reacting, trapped in a cycle of emotional dependency that keeps you exactly where you are right now. But here's the truth that nobody's telling you. The path to real power, the kind that can't be taken away, doesn't come from external validation or material success. It comes from something the ancient Stoics understood 2,000 years ago, something most men today have completely forgotten. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, wrote in his private journals that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Think about that. The Emperor of Rome, commanding legions, ruling territories that stretched across continents, understood that his real power wasn't his armies or his wealth. It was in his mind. And if you're sitting there thinking your circumstances are holding you back, you're playing exactly the game the world wants you to play. Let's talk about what's really happening in your life right now. You wake up, check your phone, see what everyone else is doing, compare yourself, feel inadequate, then distract yourself with work, entertainment, or relationships that don't actually fulfill you. You're living reactively. Every decision you make is a response to external pressure. What you want, what your boss expects, what society says you should be doing. Epictetus, who went from being a slave to one of the most respected philosophers in history, said it plainly. There's only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. You're worried about everything except what you can actually control. The red pill community talks a lot about waking up to female nature, to societal conditioning, to the reality of power dynamics. But here's what most of them miss. Waking up to external truths means nothing if you're still enslaved internally. Rollo Tomasi breaks down hypergamy, sexual market value, the brutal mechanics of intersexual dynamics. Essential knowledge, yes, but knowing that women are attracted to status and strength doesn't help you if you're still seeking their validation to feel complete. You've just traded one form of dependency for another. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He spoke about the shadow, the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge, the weaknesses you hide, the fears you won't face. Modern masculinity is obsessed with projecting strength while avoiding the uncomfortable work of actually becoming strong. You lift weights but can't sit with your thoughts for 10 minutes. You chase women but can't stand being alone. You make money but panic when the market dips. This isn't strength. This is performance. And performance requires an audience. Real power doesn't. Seneca wrote letters from exile, from poverty, from the edge of execution, and his wisdom remained unshaken. Why? Because he had done the internal work. He had separated his identity from his circumstances. When Nero ordered him to commit suicide, Seneca faced it with calm acceptance. Not because he wanted to die, but because he understood that his true self, his capacity for reason and virtue, couldn't be touched by external force. You need to ask yourself right now, what would remain of you if everything external was stripped away? If you lost your job, your relationship, your status, your physique, what's left? If the answer frightens you, you've built your identity on sand. The modern world is specifically designed to prevent this kind of internal development. Zygmunt Bauman called it liquid modernity. Everything is temporary. Everything is consumable. Nothing requires commitment or depth. Your relationships are swipes on a screen. Your attention span has been shattered by infinite scroll. Your sense of meaning comes from likes and followers. You've been turned into a consumer of your own life, constantly seeking the next hit of dopamine, never building anything lasting. And the worst part? You think this is freedom. Schopenhauer was brutally honest about human nature. He understood that most people are driven entirely by blind, irrational desire that keeps them chasing satisfaction they'll never find. You want a promotion, then you get it and want the next one. You want the girl, then you get her and start wondering if there's someone better. You want the body, the car, the house, and every single time, the satisfaction evaporates within weeks. This isn't pessimism. This is observable reality. And until you break this cycle, you're just a sophisticated animal responding to stimuli. Here's what becoming untouchable actually means. It means building an internal fortress that external circumstances cannot penetrate. It means developing a relationship with yourself so solid that other people's opinions, market fluctuations, and societal chaos become mere weather patterns you observe from a position of stability. The Stoics call this achieving ataraxia, unshakable tranquility. But they didn't achieve it through comfort. They achieved it through discipline, through daily practice, through confronting reality exactly as it is rather than as they wished it to be. Jack Donovan writes about the way of men, about the ancestral masculine virtues of strength, courage, mastery, and honor. These aren't optional. These aren't cultural constructs. These are the foundation of masculine psychology that modern society tries to suppress because strong men are harder to control. But here's the nuance most people miss. These virtues mean nothing if they're only displayed externally. Real courage isn't posting your opinions online. It's facing the parts of yourself you're terrified to acknowledge. Real strength isn't your deadlift. It's your capacity to endure psychological discomfort without numbing yourself. Real mastery isn't over others. It's over yourself. Epictetus taught his students a simple exercise. Divide everything in your life into two categories: things you control and things you don't control. Your opinions, your desires, your aversions, your actions. These you control. Everything else, your reputation, your health, other people's thoughts, outcomes, success, failure, you don't control. Now, here's the devastating part. You spend 90% of your mental energy worrying about things in the second category. Your anxiety about what she thinks, your stress about the economy, your anger at political events, your fear of aging. None of these things are under your control. Every moment spent worrying about them is a moment of voluntary suffering. Think about your relationships. Esther Perel has documented how modern relationships fail because people expect their partner to be everything: best friend, perfect lover, career supporter, emotional therapist, adventure companion. This isn't love. This is outsourcing your entire emotional life to another person. When Marcus Aurelius lost people he loved, he reminded himself that all things are temporary, that attachment to impermanent things guarantees suffering. This doesn't mean not caring. It means caring without dependency. It means loving without requiring. The moment you need someone else to feel complete, you've given them the power to destroy you. Aaron Beck, the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, proved what the Stoics knew intuitively. Your thoughts create your emotional reality, not events themselves, but your interpretation of events. You get rejected. That's just data. But you interpret it as, I'm not good enough, and suddenly you're spiraling into depression. You lose money. That's just a financial transaction. But you interpret it as, I'm a failure, and you've created your own suffering. The Stoics practice examining their judgments constantly, questioning whether their interpretations serve them or enslave them. When's the last time you questioned your automatic thoughts instead of just believing them? Machiavelli understood power in its rawest form. He wrote about the necessity of appearing virtuous while being willing to act ruthlessly when needed. Modern men hate this because they want to believe the world rewards goodness. It doesn't. It rewards effectiveness. But here's where Machiavelli and the Stoics intersect. Real effectiveness comes from emotional detachment. When you're desperate for approval, you're easily manipulated. When you're afraid of loss, you make weak decisions. When you're attached to outcomes, you can't think clearly. The man who has built internal stability can engage with power dynamics without being corrupted by them, because he doesn't need what others are offering. You're living in the most comfortable era in human history, and you're more anxious, more depressed, more purposeless than almost any generation before you. Why? Because comfort doesn't build character. Challenge does. The Stoics deliberately practiced discomfort, sleeping on hard floors, eating simple food, visualizing worst-case scenarios. Not because they were masochistic, but because they understood that the more dependent you are on external conditions for your well-being, the more fragile you become. Every luxury you can't live without is a chain. Every comfort you require is a weakness. Every convenience you depend on is a vulnerability waiting to be exploited. Right now, you're probably thinking you understand these concepts. You've read the books, listened to podcasts, maybe even taken notes. But understanding intellectually means absolutely nothing. The Stoics didn't write philosophy to be discussed at dinner parties. They wrote it to be lived, tested and refined in the chaos of real life. Seneca spent years advising an emperor, watching power corrupt everyone around him, navigating political intrigue that could end his life at any moment. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations while managing military campaigns, plagues, and betrayals. Epictetus built his philosophy while living as a slave with a crippled leg. These weren't armchair philosophers. They were men testing wisdom against brutal reality. And that's exactly what you need to do. Start with this. For the next week, track every single moment you seek external validation. Every time you check how many likes your post got. Every time you adjust your behavior based on someone else's potential judgment. Every time you feel that spike of anxiety about what others think. Don't try to change it yet, just observe it. What you'll discover is horrifying. You're not living your life. You're performing a character you think others want to see. Your authentic self has been buried under layers of social conditioning, fear, and a desperate need for approval. Jung called this a persona, the mask you wear for society. The problem is you've been wearing it so long you've forgotten it's a mask. The rational male framework that Rollo Tomassi presents isn't just about understanding women. It's about understanding the game you've been playing without realizing it. You've been conditioned to believe that being nice, being agreeable, being emotionally available will earn you love and respect. It won't. It earns you utility value. You become the guy she settles for after she's finished exploring other options. But here's the deeper issue. Even when you learn this, even when you start acting differently, if you're doing for a validation, you've changed nothing fundamental. You're still externally driven. You're still a puppet, just pulling different strings. Real transformation requires something most men aren't willing to do. Complete honesty about who you actually are right now. Not who you want to be, not who you pretend to be, but who you are in this moment. Weak in certain areas, strong in others. Carrying trauma you haven't processed. Harboring resentments you haven't released. Avoiding truths you don't want to face. The shadow work that Jung described isn't optional if you want genuine power. Every aspect of yourself you refuse to acknowledge becomes a vulnerability someone else can exploit. Every weakness you hide from yourself will sabotage you at the worst possible moment. Schopenhauer believed that life is essentially suffering, and the only escape is through aesthetic contemplation or ascetic denial of the will. He was half right. Life does involve suffering. That part is unavoidable. But the Stoics offered something more practical. You can choose your suffering. You can suffer the discipline of daily practice, or you can suffer the regret of wasted potential. You can suffer the discomfort of difficult conversations, or you can suffer the slow death of unfulfilling relationships. You can suffer the challenge of building something meaningful, or you can suffer the emptiness of comfort and distraction. One form of suffering builds character. The other destroys it. You're going to suffer either way. Choose the suffering that makes you stronger. Let's talk about your daily routine, because that's where philosophy either lives or dies. Marcus Aurelius started every morning reminding himself that he would encounter difficult people. Liars, ingrates, the arrogant, the envious. But instead of being surprised or upset by this, he prepared for it mentally. He remembered that these people act from ignorance, that their actions can't truly harm his character, that responding with anger would only damage himself. How do you start your mornings? Scrolling through carefully curated highlight reels of other people's lives, comparing yourself, feeling inadequate before you've even gotten out of bed? You're programming yourself for reactivity, for emotional weakness, for a day spent responding to stimuli instead of directing your own focus. Epictetus had a practice he called the premeditation of evils, deliberately imagining worst-case scenarios not to create anxiety, but to remove the power of fear. What if you lost everything tomorrow? What if she left? What if your business failed? What if you got sick? Most men avoid these thoughts desperately because they're terrifying. But that avoidance is exactly what gives these scenarios power over you. When you mentally walk through the worst possibilities, when you plan how you would respond with virtue and reason, fear loses its grip. You're no longer controlled by the desperate need to prevent these outcomes. You've already faced them, survived them in your mind, and know you would endure. The modern dating market, as brutal as it is, offers a perfect testing ground for Stoic principles. You match with someone, she ghosts you. That's just data. It says nothing about your worth. You approach someone, she rejects you. That's just her preference. It doesn't diminish you. You invest in a relationship, it ends. That's the nature of impermanent things. Your capacity for virtue, for reason, for self-respect remains completely untouched. But you don't see it this way, do you? You internalize every rejection as evidence of inadequacy. You need every woman you want you back. You can't distinguish between your inherent value and the outcomes you experience. This confusion is the source of your suffering. Machiavelli wrote that it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But he also understood that the appearance of virtue is often more useful than virtue itself. This sounds cynical, but there's a deeper wisdom here. The world responds to presentation, not reality. You could be the most virtuous man alive, but if you can't communicate value, if you can't navigate social dynamics, if you can't understand power structures, your virtue accomplishes nothing. The Stoics weren't naive about this. Marcus Aurelius was emperor. He understood politics, manipulation, strategic thinking. But he practiced these skills without letting them corrupt his internal character. That's the balance you need. Worldly effectiveness combined with internal integrity. Aaron Beck discovered that depression isn't caused by events. It's caused by distorted thinking patterns about events. Overgeneralization, catastrophizing, personalization, black and white thinking. You fail once and conclude you're a failure. Something goes wrong, and you assume everything will always go wrong. Someone doesn't like you, and you believe nobody likes you. These cognitive distortions are exactly what the Stoics were addressing 2,000 years before modern psychology. They practice examining their judgments, testing them against reality, refusing to accept their first emotional interpretation as truth. When Marcus Aurelius felt insulted, he would remind himself to look at the action itself without his judgment attached to it. Just words, just sounds. The insult only exists in his interpretation. Here's a practice that will change your life if you actually do it. At the end of each day, review everything that happened with complete honesty. What did you do well? Where did you act according to your values? Where did you compromise your principles? Where did you let fear or desire control your actions? Where did you blame external circumstances instead of taking responsibility? The Stoics called this the evening review, and it's non-negotiable for anyone serious about development. You can't improve what you won't acknowledge. You can't change patterns you refuse to see. Most men avoid this practice because it's uncomfortable to face their failures daily. But that discomfort is precisely what builds character. Jack Donovan argues that masculinity is about gang values: strength, courage, mastery, and honor within a group of men. He's right that modern society has systematically destroyed masculine spaces and male bonding. But there's a deeper dimension. Before you can be valuable to a brotherhood, you must be complete within yourself. A group of weak men seeking validation from each other just creates a larger echo chamber. A group of strong men who have done their internal work creates an unstoppable force. The question isn't whether you need other men. You do. The question is whether you're bringing strength to that brotherhood or just seeking to extract it from others. Zygmunt Bauman described how modern relationships have become consumable products. Swipe culture, disposable connections, the constant search for something better. You're not building anything with anyone because you're always keeping your options open, always wondering if you're settling, always ready to trade up. This isn't freedom. It's paralysis disguised as choice. The Stoics understood commitment not as limitation, but as a foundation of depth. When you commit fully to anything, a craft, a relationship, a goal, knowing it's impermanent, knowing it might end, but choosing to invest completely anyway, that's when you access real meaning. Hedging your bets, keeping escape routes open, never fully committing. That's the path to a life of shallow experiences and persistent emptiness. Let's address the hardest truth. You're going to die. Not someday in the distant future, relatively soon, and you have no idea when. Marcus Aurelius reflected on death constantly, not morbidly, but as motivation to live with urgency and purpose. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Every moment you spend scrolling mindlessly, every day you waste in a job you hate without taking steps to change it, every relationship you stay in out of comfort rather than love, every dream you postpone until someday. You're spending your life, the only resource you can't replace. Death isn't the problem. Wasting the life you have is the problem. Seneca wrote an entire essay called On the Shortness of Life, and his message was simple. Life isn't short. You're just squandering it. You give away your time freely to anyone who asks, but guard your money carefully. You waste hours on entertainment that leaves you empty, but claim you don't have time for things that matter. You scroll through other people's lives, but don't build your own. You consume endless content but create nothing. You plan to start living tomorrow, next month, next year. Seneca would tell you that you're not alive. You're merely existing, and existence without purpose isn't living. The final piece that ties everything together is this. Philosophy isn't about becoming someone else. It's about removing everything false until what remains is your authentic self, unshakable, unconditional, untouchable by external chaos. You're not building a new identity. You're excavating your real one from under all the conditioning, trauma, fear, and societal programming. The strong man you're trying to become isn't somewhere in the future. He's buried inside you right now, waiting for you to stop performing, stop seeking validation, stop running from discomfort, and start living according to your own standards. This is the work. Not reading another book, not watching another video, not discussing philosophy online. The work is daily practice, honest self-examination, deliberate discomfort, and consistent action aligned with virtue regardless of outcomes. The work is facing your fears instead of numbing them. The work is building genuine strength instead of performing it. The work is becoming someone who doesn't need the world's permission to be at peace. Start today. Start with one practice. Journal honestly. Meditate for 10 minutes. Do something difficult without seeking recognition. Review your day tonight with brutal honesty. Tomorrow, do it again. This is how you become untouchable. Not through sudden transformation, but through daily dedication to becoming slightly more aligned with truth, slightly more committed to virtue, slightly less dependent on external validation. The chaos will continue. The world won't change. But you'll stand in the center of it all unshaken, because you've built something no one can touch.